But then Jesus takes this woman who presumably has to be at least in her 20s, we would think, by the story, perhaps.
She's been hemorrhaging for 12 years.
She's been hemorrhaging.
So well into her 20s.
And the presumption here, most people think that the hemorrhaging has something to do with her reproductive system, right? That's what this hemorrhaging is related to. It's telling in the story that it says to us that she had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all she had, and it was no better, but rather grew worse. That's a huge signal. Women don't have money in the ancient world. If she's spending all the money she has no father caring for her, and she has no husband caring for her. If they were in the picture, they've left the picture because she's perpetually unclean and have some way not caring for her. So she's one of these widows or abandoned woman that the Lord has such a heart for throughout the scriptures. And so she's spending everything she has. So when Jesus looks at her, I think of like, one of the greatest acts of healing in this entire story for Jesus had to be just when he called her daughter. Now, he doesn't call her the Thegatron, because that would be kind of an insult to a grown woman. He doesn't call her that, right? He calls her daughter. But there's something powerful there. And then he does the same thing with Jairus. Jairus says, this is my dear daughter. And that you got to think, he's like, Jesus, you're just going to sit here and talk to her now she's dead? And he comes, but he uses this language of talitha cum, which is translated here, literally enough, this is one of those, really, I try to drive this home for my students. This is one of those sacred places where you get the actual Aramaic of Jesus. This is perhaps exact words Jesus would have spoken, talitha cum. And it's translated, Mark tells this little girl, I say to you, arise. Talitha, though, literally could be translated as lamb. Right? That's what the Aramaic would be. It's like a pet name. So Jesus actually, in a sense, supersedes Jairus' affection. Right? Jairus calls his 12-year-old daughter at the verge of womanhood and betrothal. He calls her dear daughter, and Jesus comes in and says, my little lamb. Get up. Right? Like he actually, so I think in both cases we see this tenderness. First, the tenderness of Jesus for this woman who's spent 12 years completely ostracized. However she found to get money, spending any money she had. And then even in Jairus and all his concern, he actually has greater intimacy for Jairus' daughter than Jairus himself can show, right? And so in both cases, I think shows, oh no, he does indeed care, right? And there's this invitation to trust in him and the process that takes place in the healing Jesus brings.
That's beautiful.
Do you ever play the game? Do any of you ever play the game where it's like, I wonder what happened next? Like, this story's over, it's done. You know, we know that Jesus gets her something to eat because he's very concerned about the present need in that moment. Dying's hard work, you need some bread. But, so like, I sometimes play this game, I do this with the prodigal son, where it's like, what would have breakfast been like the next day after that party? And like the real conversation between the brothers and the dad. And I've sometimes wondered, okay, this woman was bleeding for as long as that little girl had been alive, 12 and 12. Do you think they ever ran into each other in the marketplace? I had the chance, Alex and I were on the set of The Chosen a few months ago together, and like walking through the set, it just kind of makes it real, like how tight everything would have been in that world and how you likely would have known your neighbors. Like the women healed on the same day, the young girl and this grown woman who'd been isolated. What would they have talked about in their encounter with the healer and with this Lord of their life who saw them not as a project or a problem, but as a beloved worthy of picking up and taking care of? And it's not scriptural to imagine that those conversations in the marketplace, but I think it's worth kind of picturing in your head that all these people would have known one another and also known the Lord in this very intimate way. And what would they have shared about? I don't know, it's a fun little project to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is something about encountering the scriptures and trying to take everything we can from it, you know, to sit with them and say, Lord, what do you want me to know about this? Like in my own life and in the own places of my heart that desire you to heal. And maybe I'm waiting, and maybe there's long suffering, or, you know, whatever. What does Jesus want us to know? And I think for me, some of the things I've taken from stories like this is that he can do it. He is powerful enough to heal and do things that we cannot do. We can't explain this. You know, my dad, nobody could do that. He was a very successful man. He couldn't buy his way out of an illness or negotiate his way out of an illness. It was only the power of God that could heal. And yet so that's important to take. These aren't just stories that are on these pages, but this is the real Jesus who still lives. Praise God. And that we can encounter him and speak to him and ask him to speak into those places in our life. But then, go ahead, Father.
Well, just how personal and tender these encounters are.
Yes.
And we were talking in the first episode about the stars, right? And we think, the stars, we're starstruck, the famous people, those who are so successful. I mean, apparently not. I suppose the synagogue official, maybe Jairus, is nobody knows who any of these people are, but God knows who each one of them is, and knows them personally, and then meets them not in the moment of their success, not like after Jairus preached his greatest sermon in the synagogue, or however that works, not after the greatest moments of having hit the stage and in the limelight. No, in the moment of sickness, 12 years of sickness, in the moment of not just sickness, but death of the daughter, the things that are the worst scenarios for us become, in fact, the best day of their lives, that they would never forget. It's the turning point that sets that sets the direction for everything else. And so, but those personal encounters with the littlest and the least and their worst moments, it's such a sign of hope for us.
Exactly, and I love that he wants to look at her. Who touched me? You know, and it says he's looking around, and I think for many of us, we need to know that God is looking. He wants to see us. He wants us to see him. And there's something in the midst of, I know she was healed at that point, but there are places in my life that I'm experiencing suffering and doesn't seem like a healing is coming right now. These are a sign of what's to come. These are the sign that he is like, he can be present to us in the midst of our suffering and breathe life and hope. And even like we were talking about this in a previous episode, two things are happening at the same time. We can have suffering and we can have blessing. We can have, both of these experiences. And I think for us to move from a place of just the relief that Jesus can bring to the encounter with him as a person and him actually being everything for us, even in the midst of the suffering, because it won't end here. It's not the end of the story. And I know for me, I have to hang on to those hopeful pieces that the Lord will heal in the end. It will be done. All will be well in the end. And I was just speaking with my parents are in their older years now, and I went home to visit them, and one of their friends is in a nursing home. She's very close to the end, and she's suffering a lot right now. And she was telling me, I said, how are you doing? And she says, well, and she wasn't belaboring the point, but she was like, not good. And then she said, but all will be well. And I was like, oh my goodness, to just see someone almost there and just hanging on with that hope. I'm like, I need to have God to breathe his hope into those places where I am still in the midst of the suffering, Yeah.
I thought there was this beautiful point. It's on a little bit of that, and you, Father, and you guys will think I'm weird for quoting Kobe Bryant, but the...
God rest his soul.
Yeah, certainly. But he was in this... the analogy I was referencing on the working out is flawed in one major way, and I think you hit on it beautifully, which is this, like, Jairus, like, he's done. There's, like, you hear your daughter's dead, you don't have anything. You're just collapsed on the ground. You can't do anything. But Kobe was in this interview with Stephen A. Smith or something, and Stephen said something, and Kobe just goes, God is good. And Stephen goes, is that it? Is that as simple as it is? And Kobe goes, yeah, that's as simple as it gets. And he goes, well, how do you know that? And he goes, you don't know it till you try to carry that cross, and you fall and you get back up and you try to carry that cross, but you can't carry it anymore. So Jesus comes and he picks up you and he picks up the cross and he carries you both. And it's just like, oh, yes, like, it's this like, I don't know, we also, and me especially, have this tendency, even in the faith world, to be like, oh, I can do this, like, I'm going to get stronger in my faith, and I'm going to do all this stuff and whatever, and the real progress comes when, and the real grace is when I'm like, okay, I give up, I can't do it, I'm done, that's it, and then he's like, okay, that's what I was waiting for, like, I got you now. And so it's this beautiful example here of how he does that for Jairus.
The actual overcoming of self-reliance, not getting someone to help you become successful at self-reliance,
Yes.
but actually losing self-reliance.
Yeah. And there's something really tactile about it too, in that, like, she touches the garment and he holds the hand. It's not some, like, ethereal, you're healed. Like, there's, like, a physicality to all of it. And I feel like when we're really suffering, you can feel it. It feels like a burden. It feels like a weight. One of the most beautiful parts of the Franciscan conferences in the summer, the Steubenville conferences, is when they do the procession with the monstrance. And like, this is iconic, right? We've all been in that room and the monstrance comes around and it's close, and priests will often say, like, you can touch my
Humeral veil.
the humeral veil, right? Like, I almost said cope, but I knew that wasn't it. That's the cape. But like, to reach, and it's one of the most privileged places when you're on a ministry team and you get to see, especially teenagers, not much more than 12, reach, and you can see like the bravery build, and like, wait, I can touch the hem of his garment, and it's like, yeah, that's same Jesus, right? Like, there's the appearances of bread, and we can go into all the theology of it, but you get to have that moment. He's taking you by the hand, he's allowing you to reach out to him, and you know, to help. It feels like the cross is being lifted a little bit, like, oh, like I can feel him there with me. And we're a sacramental people, like we are a tactile people in the way we embrace that and experience that.
Well, yeah, it just struck me as you're saying that, just the Eucharist, not just in the monstrance, but in every Mass we go to. I mean, this closeness we have of who touched my garments, that the Lord deigns to come to dwell in our body, is a pretty wild right, thing. And that it is basically in the chaos and busyness of our days, that somehow in the busyness of everything I have going on, I slip into this now much more beautiful chapel at Francis University, and I sit there, and then the Lord comes and decides, right? And but I do think there's this way, it strikes me with this, who touched me? I mean, I think, Heather, you were talking about that question he poses. I find that so powerful, is you think that she basically got what she wanted at a certain level. She's going to doctors forever. If any of the doctors could have made her better that quickly, she would pay them every penny she had, everything she had. But this is perhaps what she actually needed more. I just thank you for joining us. If you've noticed, I guess I try to draw attention to this, at least this episode, we have these really big books sitting in front of us. These are the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, Old and New Testament. This is 25 years of work by Dr. Scott Hahn, Curtis Mitch, and the St. Paul Center team here, putting together this masterpiece. Everything from Genesis to Revelation. And it just gives you study notes to give you the wisdom of the church fathers and doctors, the best of biblical exegesis, to really make your study and prayer something so much better. St. Josemaria Escrivá, a great friend in heaven to me, and I think many people, used to say that an hour of study is an hour of prayer for the modern apostle. And I think that is very much the invitation here, is that when we encounter Jesus as our teacher and Lord, when he comes and heals us by the power of his Spirit, there had to be, you were saying, Katie, what was the aftermath of this? I'd have to think the aftermath in any of these miracles would be a desire to come to know Jesus more, to ask questions, to meet his disciples, to know everything possible about this man who'd worked so powerfully in their life. And perhaps this study Bible and the other resources of the St. Paul Center can be a help in that. We've been joined this week by our special spotlight group, Team St. Paul with the Military Archdiocese. This is a group of young adult missionaries who accompany and support others serving in the United States military, the United States military, missionaries in the military. There we go, Team St. Paul. They'll have a question for us, which I will answer in a video to you later this week. Thank you so much for joining with us. Know of our prayers for you. May the Lord give you his peace, and see you next week.